Major breaking news. NBC News has just announced reports of a settlement involving forced reset triggers between the Trump administration and the Second Amendment groups that sought to declare those to be perfectly legal items, as opposed to what the Biden administration was doing, which is arguing that forced reset triggers were quote-unquote machine guns that could be effectively banned under the National Firearms Act. Let's break this down when we come right back. Hey folks, I'm Mark Smith, host of the Four Box Diner, proud American gun owner, constitutional attorney, member of the United States Supreme Court Bar, and I'm proud to say the top voice of the Second Amendment in America. Thank you, 2025 Gundies Awards. I appreciate your support. It is just being reported on X by Ken Delinian, the Department of Justice reporter for NBC News out of Washington, D.C., with an exclusive report that the Trump administration has decided to negotiate and enter into a settlement involving so-called forced reset triggers that, of course, the left in America tries to say they make semi-automatic rifles machine guns, but we know that's not true. After oral argument in December in front of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit down there in Louisiana and Texas, it seems pretty clear that the Second Amendment community was going to win this fight over forced reset triggers, which, of course, the Biden administration was trying to take the position that these were essentially machine guns or machine gun conversion kits, and therefore could effectively be banned under the National Firearm Act, which declares machine guns and things that can become machine guns and so on and so on. Machine guns that essentially are banned unless they're registered. And of course, forced reset triggers are one such item that the Biden administration really hated, claiming that these were effectively machine guns, machine gun conversion kits, or something equally illegal. Now, of course, rather than using Congress to pass a law that says something like this is illegal, assuming A, that could be done, and B, that would be constitutional, both of which are sketchy, the reality is the Biden administration wanted to do this through executive order. They wanted to do this through bullying by the ATF, and a whole host of Second Amendment related groups, including the National Association for Gun Rights, brought major lawsuits. And according to the reporting by NBC News, right, they are saying that the Justice Department under President Trump is decided to concede the fight, which I think is the correct answer here, by the way, legally and factually, and essentially to acknowledge that yes, forced reset triggers are not machine guns, they're not arms, they're simply a parts, if you will, and there's going to be, according to the reporting of NBC News, there is going to be a settlement that basically says that the federal government will be permanently enjoined, will permanently not view forced reset triggers as any sort of illegal thing. Specifically, this is what the reporting of NBC News says about it. Quote, under the settlement, the Justice Department will bind itself in perpetuity not to enforce the machine gun ban against any device that functions like forced reset triggers. One person familiar with the settlement told NBC News, the ATF must also return thousands of seized forced reset triggers to their previous owners. In other words, machine guns will soon become legal to possess and purchase, and the federal government will flood the market with these devices. Okay, now I'm not sure about some of those quotes from these sources, that what they said to NBC News, whether or not it's really correct. But what it does appear to be correct, according to NBC News, is that forced reset triggers will no longer be treated as verboten as prohibited devices under the National Firearms Act or under federal gun control law, which I think is clearly the right answer. By the way, if I can just step back big picture and do a couple things here. First of all, for those of you who are not familiar with forced reset triggers, let me just give you a basic definition of them. You guys out there in the sort of the gun space, the expertise space, the guys that shoot stuff on YouTube all the time, you're all going to be more familiar with the details and the technology than I am. But essentially, for those of you who want to understand what forced reset triggers are, the way I interpret them is you basically get kind of two shots with one pull of the trigger. That's how I kind of explain it. But technically speaking, this is what they are. I'm just going to grab this off kind of the internet for you guys. I'm sure it's accurate for our purposes here. I'm sure you can get more detailed. But basically, a forced reset trigger is a device that increases the rate of fire of semi-automatic firearms by forcing the trigger to reset after each shot. This allows the shooter to fire multiple rounds with a single trigger pull. Again, I don't care about the specific details of those definitions. I don't need to be that specific with the technology. The bottom line is, this is a device that you can add to your semi-automatic rifle. Or semi-automatic firearm. There's nothing illegal about these things, and yet the Biden administration was trying to make these illegal by virtue of waving this magic hand of the executive branch and not going to Congress. If they wanted to go to Congress and try to pass a law that says forced reset triggers and anything like that are illegal, well, let them have at it. But again, we should not be legislating things like this at all through the executive branch with regulations by, among others, the ATF. Nevertheless, this is a huge win if the reporting turns out to be true, and it makes a lot of sense to me because I just want to put this into context. One of the concerns that people have about the change in administrations from the Biden administration to the Trump administration goes like this. Hey, that's great, Mark, that the Biden administration was terribly anti-gun. They did a lot of anti-gun stuff. Now we have the Trump administration in there. They're going to do good stuff on guns. And then at some point, you're going to have a President Kathy Hochul, a President Gavin Newsom, a President Bob Ferguson, who knows, right? Josh Shapiro, who knows what it's going to be? That will be the argument. And when that happens, all these Biden things will go back into a place. Well, one way to prevent that from happening is for the federal government to enter into a settlement agreement with people like the Second Amendment community. And as part of that settlement agreement, there will be a court-ordered final judgment that says that the federal government will not do X, Y, and Z, whatever that may be. In this case, they're not going to try to say that gun owners that own these forced reset triggers without, let's say, a tax stamp get to go to prison or something like that. This is not unusual at all to see these kinds of settlements. The federal government enters into these settlements with permanent injunctive relief all the time. It's just no one ever did it to participate, to protect, to help the Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms because, of course, our federal government, our Department of Justice was always terrible. Either you had anti-gunners in the Department of Justice that wouldn't do anything for the Second Amendment or gun owners, or at best, you had law and order conservative types in there that thought that the most important people that are allowed to have guns or should have guns are the police and government, and they were good on police and good on military, but they weren't so good on private civilian ownership of firearms. Now, we have a pro-Second Amendment president here. I've told you the Trump administration will be the most pro-Second Amendment administration in American history. I completely stand behind that prediction I made repeatedly, and I'm doing it again, and this is further proof of this. Now, I just want to also step back and give you one big perspective. It is very important to understand the difference between a free society and a totalitarian, government-driven, totalitarian, communism-style society. And what is the difference? The biggest difference between a free society like we have in the United States and a communist, totalitarian society you have in places like China and North Korea and so on is this. In America, you have the permission and the freedom to do anything you want unless that activity is outlawed. Hear what I just said? You can do anything you want freely in America as a free citizen unless it's outlawed. That is in stark contrast to a lot of other countries, which is you are not allowed to do anything without first and foremost going and asking for permission from the government. See the difference? In the communist societies, in the totalitarian societies, you have to ask permission to do something first from the government, get that permission before you can act. In our society, our free society, we get to act unless it's already been forbidden by, let's say, the legislature. Now, the reason why I want you to understand that disconnect or that difference between these two systems of government is because it speaks directly to the forced reset trigger issue as I see it. And that is this. Unless those items are unequivocally, expressly outlawed by Congress, right? Unless it's unambiguous that you cannot have those, the presumption should be in favor of freedom. Any benefit of the doubt should go to the free citizen, to the Americans, not to the government. Tie goes to the runner, as they kind of say in baseball. Here, the tie goes to freedom. So if there's any doubt about whether or not forced reset triggers can be banned under the National Firearms Act, whether or not forced reset triggers are machine guns, whether forced reset triggers are machine gun conversion kits, whatever you want to call it, if there's any doubt, in my view, the way I would approach this is simply saying, if there's any doubt, tie goes to freedom. No, you cannot ban these. And I think the Trump administration generally has that approach, which is, hey, if Congress wants to try to ban these things, let them give it a shot. But until then, close the pie hole. And, these are perfectly legal and people can do whatever they want with them. And I think that's what the settlement, which again is being reported by NBC News. I don't have personal knowledge of any of this. I'm just telling you what NBC News is reporting, that the National Association for Gun Rights and possibly other groups, I don't know, are entering into some sort of settlement with the Justice Department for a permanent injunction, which means that the federal government will be bound by that moving forward. I also think it's quite interesting to the extent that any FRTs were confiscated, they would have to be returned. So anyway, very exciting news out of the Justice Department, out of the Trump administration. And I totally agree with this. This is the right move. You should not be legislating from executive order, and the Trump administration is not going to be doing that anymore, especially when it comes to clearly things that clearly violate the Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms. One additional thing from this NBC News report from Ken Delanian, he says, quote, some of the most popular versions of these devices are made by a company called Rare Breed Triggers, which was sued by the ATF in a separate case. That case will have to be dropped as part of the settlement, one of the people familiar with it said. Proponents of the devices dispute that they turn regular guns into machine guns, but the ATF determined that the devices allow a semi-automatic AR-15 rifle to fire as fast as a military M16 in automatic mode, according to court records. So anyway, excellent reporting by Ken Delanian here out of NBC. So there you have it. Hope you check out the full post down below. And again, I will keep you apprised as I learn more information about this potential settlement. But I think the Trump administration should be settling a lot of these cases involving ATF overreach in all respects. And the way it should go down is with permanent injunctions, court orders, so that to the extent some anti-gun liberal president comes into office, they will be bound by that permanent injunctive relief and that settlement, no different than has gone on for decades and decades when it comes to, let's say, oversight of a police department, oversight of prisons, whatever it is, injunctions in that respect happens all the time. It's just a great sign to see the federal government being enjoined when it comes to violating our Second Amendment rights and when it comes to ATF and government overreach, touching fingers with and overriding and violating our freedoms as American-loving, freedom-loving, gun-loving Americans who want to protect our Constitution and more. So there you have it, folks. Hope you enjoyed today's episode. Make sure you follow me on X at @4boxofdiner. Don't forget to subscribe both to YouTube and to Rumble. I look forward to talking to you all again real soon here at the 4 Boxes Diner.
Orders up. Table 2A.